You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring our first guest of the day into the discussion. We have on with us Fred Karger. Fred is the president of Right Equals Right. And Fred, first of all, welcome to the Final Say Radio Show. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And if you can give our audience a little bit of background. I know you've been involved politically. You've worked for some presidents, haven't you?
I have, yes. I was a political consultant with a firm in Los Angeles called the Dolphin Group. I was partnered in for 27 years. We worked for any number of presidential candidates and three presidents, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Gerald Ford on their campaigns, and dozens of other candidates for office and governors and senators, and so a wide array of political experience, all on the Republican side.
Excellent. So now, I actually met you at a CPAC, and we were trying to figure it out. We think it was 2010, and you had a group of people up you, and you were, I guess at the time, you had announced that you were going to run for president, but you were putting out the feelers, and you wanted to see what the pulse was. And could you tell us, well, one, why were you running, and what were some of the issues that you were championing?
Well, I was testing the waters. There are three steps that any presidential candidate needs to go through with the Federal Election Commission, and I had a very good attorney who counseled me on that, and that was kind of phase one, where I was seriously considering running before the exploratory committee phase, and so I went to CPAC, and I'd hoped to have a booth there. I ran a historic campaign, and when I did eventually file for president in April of 2010, I ran as the first openly gay candidate of either major political party, and did so, of course, as a Republican. But CPAC had kept me out of the straw poll. They wouldn't even allow me to rent a booth at their trade show. So I went ahead and rented a suite under my own name through the hotel, because CPAC wouldn't allow me through their facility. And we had a reception up there after the dinner. Had a couple other candidates like Gary Johnson, who was running, and a couple hundred people that came through there throughout the night. So I went around the system that they had excluded me from and came out very successfully. But I wanted to bring back this American spirit that my old boss Ronald Reagan brought to the country, and I define that as kind of lighting a fire under this country, and also the ability to get along. And that's what I think is sorely lacking in D.C. right now and state capitals around the country. And I had hoped to do a little of that and to have a seat at the table and participate in the Republican debates.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, we're actually, the event we're at is for Frank Gaffney's the Center for Security Policy. And, they're another organization that's had the same type of issue with, CPAC. It seems that if you take, I'm not going to say extreme, but what they would consider to be an extreme position on any issue, it could be a social issue, it could be a security issue, it seems like you're not always welcome. And we find ourselves always in an interesting position, as radio hosts, because we attend these events and we see both sides of the story, and it becomes difficult because you become friendly with people on all sides. So you try not to interject yourself in between, but certainly I think one thing you did say is very important. Everybody should be able to be part of the discussion, because even if you disagree with somebody, you always learn from having the conversation, Fred. And I think you've probably found that throughout your entire career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly got a valuable lesson from Ronald Reagan, because he espoused the term big tent within the Republican Party. And, of course, as a minority party, getting further apart in numbers from the Democratic Party day by day, we need to include everyone. I'm not for excluding anyone. I don't agree with a lot of positions that Republicans have, but I welcome them in and discuss things, and let's look at the issues we have in common. And I think the Tea Party has really put that aside. Many of them got their start in the Reagan campaigns and Reagan administration, but they're doing a disservice to President Reagan by trying to exclude people like me or others who may be a little more center position, particularly on social issues, and it's turning off the younger people, and we're losing that battle for longevity, which President Reagan really positioned himself for. turned the party around after it was pronounced DOA after Watergate. 6 years later, when President Reagan was elected, he brought in younger people. He won the re-election in 49 states and took over both houses of the Congress, and so things changed. Now, it's cyclical, and I assume we will get that back, but not if we keep going down this far religious right trend.
No, that's an interesting point. Fred, from your experience, when you speak with younger people, what do you discuss the issues or you have conversations, what do you think are most important for this younger generation? I mean, the college student today, the next generation of coming into the business world, into the political world. What are the factors? Is it economics? Is it the social issues? Is it none of the above? Is it,
I would say economics, jobs. Mm-hmm. People are very scared, and I spoke and hundreds really of high schools, colleges, younger organizations around the country, and number one concern that they would ask me about is their future. And more students are staying in school, getting postgraduate degrees, primarily because there are no jobs out there. And so that's what we need to focus on. And that's what I focused on in my campaign. And now it's kind of getting detoured, that issue, because of the shutdown, because of Obamacare, and there are a lot of other things that have really stepped to the front. But we need to concentrate on turning this economy around, and there are many ways to do it. But we've got to start focusing on that, and part of that is working with both parties in Congress and the president to get some things done to really get this economy going and to free up the private sector in order to do so.
Fred, this is John. I'll tell you what, I also met you at that event, and I liked you immediately. I thought you were pretty spot on the policies and so forth. And I particularly like the background, who you worked for, where your original drive came from. But I want to just throw kind of the elephant, so to speak, on the table here. There was something interesting. I'm sure you heard this, because Brett and I had this debate with many people at CPAC, was a lot of people had said he's not a serious candidate, and he may actually be sort of a plant, a distraction. And I didn't believe it at the time. Maybe I would have had I not met you, because you can understand why they would make that. So I just want to kind of address it before I ask you a more specific question. Was that issue itself a big problem, and do you feel that issue was put aside so that if you or somebody similar to you runs again, hopefully it'll be more about the issues and less about the personal preferences?
Well, yeah, that was a great question. There were a lot of skeptics out there, particularly close friends and even family members, because I'd never run for political office before. I'd never worked my way up. I'd never been elected, and very presumptuous to run for the highest office in the land. But I wanted to make a point about the direction of the country, the direction of the party, and also send a message to my community that there are no boundaries anymore. You can be open and gay and even run for president. But I was really concerned about our country. And I thought by jumping into that race, by talking about issues in the Republican Party, by trying to get a place in the debates to keep some of those Republicans who are running away from the divisive social issues and more on the economy and national security and things that I think have much more place in a presidential debate and a campaign, and certainly governing instead of divisive issues. So I was in it as a long shot. I knew it was a stretch to get into a debate. There were four of us who were left out. I tried my darndest. I have a documentary coming out in January called Fred Who, and it talks about the roller coaster ride they had, including CPAC, including the debates. I filed complaints against Rupert Murdoch and Fox because I did qualify for the third debate, which was in Ames, Iowa, but they excluded me. And I think if I'd had a voice, I would have excited a lot of people, and particularly younger people, like Ron Paul did, to join this political process and not write off the Republican Party. So I was serious from day one. I was not a plant. I don't mind going after some of my fellow opponents when we differ on issues. Nothing personal, of course, but certainly on issues. And I think I would have been a nice change of pace in those debates.
You know, it's funny. Personally, I don't mind a debate. I think as long as we're being respectful to each other, we can have a reasonable debate, whether it's about something as deeply personal as gay rights or other personal policies. However, my feeling from day one has always been the federal government by design is supposed to be small. It's supposed to be a handful of things extremely well that are endowed upon our government by the Constitution, and stay out of all those other issues. Because if you think about it, to a large extent, you can argue that we lost this election because we fell into the hate women trap, and the gay rights thing actually became a big thing that worked against us. Instead of focusing on those things that I think are profoundly important, like national defense, foreign policy, economics and currency, courts, energy, infrastructure, maybe a few more that may round out a top 10, everything else government should stay out of. Now, have you, based upon your experience in running through here, have you found that some of the policies that you were presenting have not fallen on deaf ears? And have you found any new energy? Have you found other people who've sort of captured your voice and tried to leverage your passion and your experience?
Well, certainly some of the Republicans, John Huntsman, Gary Johnson, former governors of Utah and New Mexico, both have now come out and support full marriage equality, support gay marriage. I became friends with each. I hope I had some influence there. So I think they're putting some of these issues aside, but being courageous as Republicans and coming out in support of that. And so the pledges that were signed, I just doing a little piece that's in the Washington Times today about that we used to, in the consulting business, our candidates would get questionnaires, they called them, but were from special interest groups, organizations, to try and gauge where the candidate was on their particular issue. Now they're in the form of pledges, and this National Organization for Marriage, which is a hate group, defines a hate group. They sent out a pledge that I think 7 of the candidates signed, 3 of us did not. Ron Paul didn't, and they started attacking him. So they ran actually NOM, the National Organization for Marriage, ran attack ads of about $500,000 worth in Iowa to derail his candidacy in the Iowa caucus, and I think they had some success. So it's unfortunate, but I think that some of these issues that now some of the courageous Republicans are coming out for, certainly there was some other dialogue that I helped create, whether it was potentially lowering the voting age to let younger people vote at either 16 or 17. I think it's overdue. I think we should certainly look at a 28th Amendment to the Constitution, certainly strong national defense, and our presence in the world needs to be evaluated. Certainly discussion on both wars when I started. Now we're down to one. And on the health care. And I was very outspoken against Obamacare at the time. I think a federal health policy is a disaster. And I said it should be left to the state with federal encouragement, because the 50 states are all very different. And we're seeing now that unravel. And I just think I brought some issues to the table, including my economic plan on repatriation of some of our tax money abroad, and a variety of things, incentives to create small business opportunities here and entrepreneurships through that repatriation of some of the tax dollars overseas, bringing them here to create microloans so people could start their own businesses. So those students we're talking about coming out of college that don't have a job waiting at a company can start their own with a small microloan. So I think some of these ideas are now coming into the political discussion, and I'm very proud of my contribution to the 2012 cycle.
That's excellent. Fred, this is Brett again. When you look at these issues, and let me preface this by saying this, I have several friends, some from all various parts of my life that are gay, some are lesbians, or, whatever they might be, and a lot of them happen to be conservative, and they've had a very troubling time belonging to a party or a political thought when they know that in some way they're excluded on certain issues. And so I could understand, I'm not saying that we agree eye to eye on all these issues, but I could certainly understand, and I do agree that it should be discussed without attack. And also I'd like to say this, that it certainly would have been interesting to have a few more people in the debates to balance out the thought. And also, I think it can go a long way in representing to the people in the United States that this party could accept, maybe they don't have to accept all the ideas, but we could accept somebody coming to the table to discuss them openly. And I think that goes a long way than just shutting people out.
If you want to grow the party and survive, that's the way. And what really impressed me my first time at CPAC, and of course Ronald Reagan is the one who really put CPAC on the map. His participation is what turned it into the main big organization it has become, but was the number of younger people. And we were talking about, I think, 1,200 or 1,500 young people, students that were there and participating. Right. And these are the ones who are, if we're going to have a future, they're on national defense and national policy and foreign affairs and economics. They are, I think, in lockstep with so much of the Republican Party, but where they question the Republican Party is on these divisive social issues like marriage equality, and they could care less. And I know because I worked with many. I had many that I met at CPAC, many other conservative organizations, state party conventions, that were so refreshed by the Karger campaign because I was not turning against their views. And these are, of course, a lot of straight allies, but these are just people who feel that live and let live. And if people want to get married who are of the same sex, then more power to them. It's good for the economy. These states now, 15 states, 16 today, I guess, with Illinois, that's a huge boost to the economy. I know $1 million gay weddings. So I've argued that with some of my Republican friends. Look at what this is doing for the California economy. It's over $1 billion to California that we lost for the 4 years until the Supreme Court reinstated it. Now Hawaii is going to get all these weddings and the triple value of a wedding when people have to travel and gifts. And it's great for the economy, but more importantly, it's great for human beings to know that they're no different. And growing up gay in the 50s and 60s as a young man, and then the 70s, 80s, 90s as a Republican consultant, I just know how I had to live a double life and how destructive that was to me personally. And to know that I can be open and out now, and that kids can look at a guy like me or athletes or other politicians and so many people that are very comfortable in their own skin and living very openly and honestly, and know that they're not different, that they can have very strong self-esteem and be who they are. And I think it is the greatest contribution that those of us who are leaders can do to help an entire generation and future generations just to feel good about themselves.
That's right. Sometimes I joke that, the people who are, having these gay marriages, they love it now, wait until they go through their first divorce. But
I was with a friend who one of my first friends, he's getting divorced. And I think it's great, not because I'm happy that his marriage isn't up, but it shows the world that we're just like everyone else. And that is all we want to be, just to be left alone, raise families, do a life without discrimination, and I think that some of these organizations say that they're pro-family. You'll never find anybody more pro-family than I am, and that's very important to me. My family, my relationship, that's what that's about, and so it should be encouraged across all lines in this country that everyone should have that opportunity to be a family and raise kids and live a happy first life.
Right. Fred, in just the last couple of minutes, do you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I just want to give you a chance to talk about right equals rights, just to, a couple of the issues, and then also if you could answer this for me. I've always been a strong believer. I'm not a big fan of a lot of top-down legislation. In other words, I feel personally I have no problem with the states deciding state by state on an issue such as gay marriage or any social issue for that matter. I'm not a big fan of the federal government dictating this is the way it has to be in all 50 states and, so you're stuck. Because at least the other way, if you're not happy with what's going on here, doesn't matter the policy, you have the opportunity to find another state that's more suitable to some of the things or the style that you like to live. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm a definite believer in states' rights, but when it comes to civil rights, we've seen over time, I doubt we'd have interracial marriage in this country if it hadn't been for the Supreme Court in Loving versus Virginia, because there are 16 states and probably wouldn't be voting for it today either. Poll numbers were 3 or 4 to 1 against it. So the courts do need to intercede, and that's where our founding fathers had the foresight to set up the 3 branches of government. So the courts were designed to protect minorities. And if you don't get a Civil Rights Act like you did in 1964 all the time, but we did because the circumstances that took place there, if Kennedy had not been assassinated, it's unlikely that would have passed when it did. And the courts probably would have had to remedy that situation even more. So I think that certainly the same-sex marriage will be decided by the Supreme Court. Tremendous momentum for that now, but 33 states have constitutional amendments disallowing it. So the only way to get beyond that, to make this a fully equal country, as Thomas Jefferson had in mind when he said in the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, was that. And that's what the Supreme Court just decided in its defense of marriage cases. It threw out the major portion of that law that was passed. So I think in certain areas the courts will determine things. I agree. I want to reduce the size of government, the spending, and first off, the deficit. And that is a crime that continues to grow. I don't think we need the draconian shutdowns to do it. That ends up costing more. We have to work, sit down, determine how we're going to shrink government as opposed to growing it. And I used to talk about, and half kiddingly, Obama, when I first started, he'd only been in office about a year, I prescribed Zoloft for the man. I thought he looked depressed. He was always walking around with his shoulders bent down, and he seemed like he was very unhappy. And, of course, we see in his books and in his campaigns, he's very moody and withdrawn, and it's a serious problem. And he didn't do what Ronald Reagan did, that I hoped he would, because he was one hell of a speaker, that Obama, in his first campaign, and still can deliver a good stem-winder. But he didn't reach across the aisle, even among his own party. He's not a very outgoing guy, of course, much more cerebral, but Ronald Reagan invited Tip O'Neill to the White House, I think, the first week after he was sworn in, and they developed a friendship. Well, Obama does it 2 years later when he plays golf with Speaker Boehner, and they did fashion some kind of tax deal, but you don't just do that. It was so phony. You develop a relationship with these people, and yes, I was told you try to have dinner with Mitch McConnell. Might not be the most fun guy, but we deal with the leaders. We deal with of our own party, of the opposing party. We get along, and we return civility to Washington. And to me, that was something I was very excited about doing if I was given the opportunity, because I think that is what the country is begging for, and I think that is what is sorely lacking in government. And people are putting their careers in their next election before what is best for the country.
Yeah, Fred, I'm glad you raised that in that issue. And just to sort of transition, because I really didn't want to spend too much time focused on that issue anyway, but I learned a long time ago, I try to stay away from the typical third rail policy things like gay rights in marriage and so forth, because not only do I believe in more personal items, but I prefer them not to necessarily be party line issues. And I have to tell you, as somebody who was probably a little paranoid about homosexuality when I was younger, at 49 years old, I've discovered it's not contagious. But the most important thing here is that's an indicative. I think the important thing for that topic, for this conversation, is it's a very divisive political item. And I think that's actually the biggest problem with Obama on a litany of big problems, is that dividing the American people. And that's one of the things that Ronald Reagan did an amazing job of, was being a great uniter. And I have to tell you, Brett and I, when we were in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, we happened to stop into one of the congressmen's offices, and they had the Blue Dog Coalition. And it was down from like 53 Blue Dog Democrats to, what do you say, Brett, 13, I think it was? 13 or 15, and that was shocking. I mean, that just showed you how far the division has come, and that division is a natural part of the human experience. It's up to great charismatic leaders like a Ronald Reagan to bring them together. Obama actually had the microphone and had the capability. he took advantage of that microphone to actually create a wider divide. And for that, among many other things, I actually can never forgive him as a leader, because I think as a people we need to learn to come together.
Very good point.
Fred, we've enjoyed speaking with you this afternoon. We thank you for coming on. And, we certainly, you're welcome to come back on the program with us. And, I guess maybe we'll cross paths down in Washington, D.C. Are you generally out in California now, or are you getting around the country?
Well, I split my time between the East Coast and West Coast. I just rented a little apartment in New York a year ago, and I'm back there half time, and then lucky to be in Laguna Beach, California, and Orange County the other half. And I've been doing a lot of traveling. I've been back to Iowa twice. I've been to New Hampshire.
Okay.
I travel quite a bit, and as this documentary comes out, which I hope you'll enjoy, it's an hour long. We've applied to Sundance and to Slam Dance, which are two film festivals that take place in Park City, Utah, the end of January, to premiere this film. I will be traveling around with that a lot. It's I think the one and only single candidate documentary that's coming out. It was produced by John Keitel, very good documentarian, and it really tells the story, the up and down emotional roller coaster of my historic campaign. So I will be traveling to a lot of the states with that, and look forward to talking more about it, and hope a lot of your listeners will get a chance to take a look at it.
Okay, well, sounds good, and we're looking forward to that coming out. Anyway, Fred Karger, could you please give the website for Right Equals Rights?
Sure, it's Rights Equal Rights All Together.com. And I'm on Twitter at Fred Karger, which is Karger, and hope to pick up some followers. I have fun tweets and fun posts, and little different than the average Republican, but something I think that Ronald Reagan would be smirking about if he were around. I know it's just a great man, and I enjoyed working for him for 7 years on his political team, and nice to kind of carry that spirit forward.
All right. Thanks again. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but we had Gary Johnson on a couple times, and again, we enjoyed discussing some of the issues with him because it was from more of the libertarian perspective. And like you said, it's good to discuss the different thoughts and not just have, hey, it's my way or the highway kind of a philosophy. But again, Fred Karger, thank you so much for joining John and I on the Final Say Radio Show.
Thanks, Dale. Thank you, John. Talk soon.
Okay,
Bye.
Take it easy.